So here we are with the composer Mark-Anthony Turnage, the librettist Richard Thomas, and the conductor and music director of the Royal Opera, Antonio Pappano. In 2011, this created such a storm across the world. Let's go back to when it all started, that you get the commission, Mark, Anthony, and it's very exciting and there's a buzz, but how does it make it to stage? What's the very first step? Are there workshops? Do you sit down and discuss with Richard, or do you start to carve out some melodic ideas first of all?
Well, I started with Richard. I think Richard wrote a lot of early drafts, so I did a lot of honing. I mean, also because it was comedy, so there was a lot of not only the workshops were a bit later on. The initial sketches, because it would be me and obviously Richard meeting quite often. That's the other thing that is very important, I think, with collaboration. Is I think from what I read about operas in the past, but you know, particularly even recently, is that a lot of librettists don't actually meet much with the composer, and the composer gets sort of left to get on with it. And I think because this is a tricky one with comedy, there was a lot of trust built up between me and Richard, and we met regularly. But I do sketches, and then we just sort of keep reworking.
Why an opera? I mean, obviously the Royal Opera House has commissioned it, but did you feel at any point this suits the musical world rather than the opera world?
Well, not really, because I don't know much about musicals. It's not really the world that I know much about, so it's my funny take on it. Well, later on, it really doesn't sound like a musical. It gets very dark. It was very hard for me to keep it light.
And I was very kind of astonished and flattered that he actually said every word. I was, what are you doing? That's insane. And the first draft of the first draft was very depressing and spiky and angry.
Yeah. And Richard, you've written for TV, you've written Made in Dagenham is yours, is that right?
That's just coming up now,
Just coming up now. So there's
Run for tickets.
Yeah,
Delphi.
I mean, you've got a huge amount of experience in different musical genres and different performance genres. Was the process the same in this?
Well, I think what was the challenge, and I think we kind of went into it with open eyes, was to land a show with a strong comedic angle, with no previews. I mean, and basically you get one dress rehearsal, and which is insane. So, for example, there's most musicals. The musical I'm doing, which opens in November, we do 6 weeks of previews. And you can imagine the pressure. If that landed, would be, you know, we wouldn't be here. And we call them workshops here, but I said to Mike, these aren't workshops, these are previews, and we filmed them and everything. Fourth one we did, I took it home and I watched it and I fell asleep. And I called Mark. I thought it had gone really well, actually. But I called Mark and said, listen, I've watched it, I fell asleep. And Mark said, yeah, so have I. And I said,
I did.
That's a bad sign. That's a bad sign.
Yeah, I did.
And so we took there was a big giant court scene. Do you remember the old court scene? There was this 10-minute court scene that just got chucked down.
Working with composers, and it's very important that you know this, this ability to be brutally honest with the work and say, okay, that doesn't work, out. A lot of composers think basically they've written Parsifal and it's untouchable. I'm serious. And it's difficult because the process of putting an opera on, you know, you do have to have a practical side. I say that on the practicality that is on the highest artistic level, theatrical honesty. Theatre is something that it either works or it doesn't, and you've got to have the courage to say.
But with comedy, I mean,
right.
comedy is a brutal task, Martin. If you don't land the laugh, if you don't get the, and we laboured, you know, for many weeks and months over that, just trying to get the rhythms right. Bam!
We'd have a taxi running on the meter outside waiting, and if we reckoned after 2 or 3 minutes if there were no laughs, then we failed and we're off out of the theatre. We were gone because we'd failed. Because really, the whole point, especially of the opening and the stuff, is that you need to get those laughs.
What was the hardest section to compose for you, Mark-Anthony?
Well, I find it very hard to write for chorus. Sorry.
Really?
Yeah, I find it very hard, and that was the hardest for me, because also Richard...
It's a lot of chorus.
There's a lot of chorus, and especially in Act 1. I was quite relieved when I got to Act 2.
I remember we had that meeting and Tony said, for God's sake, no more chorus in Act 2.
Yeah, and I was so relieved. No, it's just not a... I mean... being an instrument, you know, I'm not really a player, but I you know, play piano and flute and stuff, and so I feel very comfortable with instrumental music. And I was in a chorus for a while, you know, just at school. But I know that Richard's, especially, you know, things like Jerry Springer and stuff, it really relies on a chorus. So I knew chorus, so I wouldn't, you know, if I'd really hated that much, I wouldn't have chosen Richard to do the libretto. But it was a real challenge for me, and I probably rewrote that part more than anything else. It was the same when I wrote Silver Tassie, which is 12 years earlier. It was a male chorus, but that was rewritten more than anything else. So that was what it was. In a way, the orchestration that I did in the last 4 or 5 months was quite relaxing because it was the easy part for me.
What did you think the audiences were going to make of it?
Well, I knew that Boy George was in the audience and Vivian Westwood.
Yeah,
Well, they got a sense of
first
humour,
night, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it was generally a very mixed kind of demographic. And what's interesting after that was that a lot of people who came and saw it they weren't seeing it because they were worried about an opera that it was accessible or whatever. They came to see it because they thought, oh, this sounds like a great show, and I think that's a sign of a really good show. I think when it doesn't matter what medium it's in, you just. But it was scary. I mean, in a way, first nights don't belong to you; they belong to everyone else.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you see your family there and people like that, and you're just petrified because you think, oh, my career's over. Christ, what do I do next? You know?
So, 20 years' time, do you think it'll still be as relevant in terms of subject matter? Do you think it'll still be as unique?
No.
I think no, I think yes, for the following reasons. I think that I think single parentage, I think sexual exploitation of women, unintentional overdoses, all that, bitter litigation over wills and inheritance. This is an age-old story, and it will still be topical.
The fact that it was real, it was reality TV at the very start.
True, I suppose. As I say, for those reasons, I still think it's just a very classic tale. And that's you don't need to know anything about it. I mean, I think if you saw it and thought at the end of it came out, the fact that it was based on real events, it's kind of is neither here nor there, actually. Hopefully,
I think you can't get hung up about 20 years' time though, because I mean, I just don't think about it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that it's difficult to say. I've got a feeling it won't be, but that's me because I'm very pessimistic.
Well,
but you're very pessimistic.
I'm sure we really hope that it is still around in 20 years and we could chat all night. But thank you so much. Please show appreciation to Richard Thomas, Antonio Pappano, and Mark-Anthony Turnage. Thanks, guys. Brilliant. Cheers.